welcome to the podcast, Steve Morgan.
Good morning.
Nice to have you with us.
Lovely to be here.
What is high performance?
Wow. I think high performance really is different things to different people. For me, I don't think I'm particularly skilled at anything, so I have to do it with endeavour. So I think hard work. I've always been hard-working. Even as a kid, I did 2 paper rounds, worked every single school holiday. I just always worked. So graft, to me, is probably the individual one. And my wife always says to me that I've got more drive. Just everything I do to the absolute ultimate. And I think so. Drive and hard work for me. Other people can do it with skill as well. I'm probably lacking in that part, but.
What's great there, though, is for people listening to this who think there's a secret to living a high-performance life or a secret to achieving what you really want. And I will go on to talk about the dreams you had as a boy that you did manage to achieve. The great thing about what you've just said is that if it is drive and desire and will and effort and graft and heart, anyone can do it. Literally anyone can do it. When I started Redrow, it was on a sewer contract, and I was down in the trenches laying the drains myself, driving the JCB, laying the concrete. It wasn't a glamorous start, but to my mind, I did it, tried to do it better than anybody else. And first 5 years, I made all the business was laying sewers. So not the most glamorous of starts, but I think every day I got up, I used to work from 7 till 7, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. And as I said, did it through sheer endeavour and always had the appetite and the hunger to want to do more. But you also had the ambition, because there'll be lots of people that would have started a business laying sewer pipes. They would have worked incredibly hard at it, and they would have had hard graft for 50, 60 years and retired laying sewer pipes. What was it about you, or where had the seeds been sown, where you were thinking, well, this is fine for now, but my ambitions are grand? I think, you have luck on the way, Jake. And my piece of luck was actually Margaret Thatcher. She came into power and put an axe through all my work. She put by that time we'd gone on to do some building works, contracting mainly, and built a few council houses and housing association properties. But when Margaret Thatcher came in, she put an axe through public spending and made us look elsewhere, and that was my lucky break. Yeah, but you capitalised on it. That same thing happened to many people who didn't do what you've then done. So is it only luck? Well, I think it was, what it did is it forced a change. And I'm delighted that it forced a change. So at the time I cursed the policies that she introduced, but with hindsight, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was, really it made me find myself, because instead of being told what to do as a contractor and these are the plans and that's the price and you've got to get on with it, I was able to go and choose the piece of land we were buying, to design what was on there, and gave me I didn't realise I had a creative side. I got thrown out of art classes at a very early age. I'm useless at art. But I found that I had a creativity, and built in Redrow the best brand in the housing market, and the most desired brand in the housing market. And that's come from my desire to always want to do better. When we build a great house, I'm going through, I'm a pain in the backside, I'm going through it. Now, that plug socket needs to be a foot closer to there to help, because it'd suit better. Yeah. The light switch, no, let's move it. I went into every last detail. So it showed me that I actually did have some creativity in me, and but it was a lucky break that got me there. Yeah.
So can I take you back to your origins in many ways, Steve, on this? Because We're in a city in Liverpool where famously Paul McCartney tells a story that he went to school for years and nobody ever knew that he could sing. So he never made the school choir because nobody had recognised that he had that talent or that interest. And you speak about you discovered relatively late after education that you had this creativity. Would you tell us a little bit about your background then in terms of this hard work, this drive, where it came from?
You know, we always talk about nature or nurture. I think in my case, it's predominantly nature. I had a fairly tough upbringing as a kid. My father was in the RAF, in National Service, and met my mum, who was only 17 at the time, and mum was only 18 when I was born. So they clearly had no money whatsoever. So we lived in a 2 up, 2 down in under the bridge in Garston. We didn't have electric, we didn't have water. So we did have water, I beg your pardon. We didn't have toilets. And it was, in fact, I was 7 years old before I knew what an inside toilet was. I went to 9 different schools. I lived in 9 different houses before I was 16. I was constantly new kid on the block. And I think, you know, it's quite tough being new kid on the block when you don't know anybody. And I was there many, many times. And
was that because your dad was in the forces?
No, he left the forces when I was about 4 years old. But he became, first of all, we were living with my grandparents, so they understandably wanted to get out of there. We went to live in a caravan, where, you know, the Caligas bottle kept failing, so that meant no light because you had these little wick candle things. You know, like an Elson loo, you know, the old blue thing that got emptied, you know, once a fortnight or something. But I can remember all those things. And I think, looking back, it was probably the fact that I constantly had to adapt as a kid. You know, going to 9 different schools is, you know, in Liverpool, it's a tough city, it's a great city, but it's a tough city, and everybody wants to try the new boy out, don't they? And, you know, it kind of toughens you up, you fight or flight, and I've always done the former.
Is that where your resilience was formed, do you think?
I think it helped. I think it definitely helped. You constantly had to be on your wits as the new kid, and as I say, the new kid, everybody wants to try the new kid out, and there wasn't many new kids actually in those days because there wasn't the same mobility. So I think it did. It definitely did. It certainly made me not afraid of anything. Yeah. And I think that has helped me in my later life.
And what was the reason for moving 9 times?
Well, my dad, first of all, had to move out of my grandparents' house, and then we moved into a forces house for a few months, and then to a caravan. We were in a caravan for 3 years, and then he said, you know, he saved up deposit for a house, and then he wanted to get a better house, but it said bought one in Toxteth, and so I had my first spell in Toxteth. I lived in Toxteth twice, and then he wanted to get a better house, and you know, and so with him. And then we, when I was 13, my dad took a job in North Wales, so I moved from Whiston, as we were then, down to North Wales. Llandudno first of all for 6 months, and then Colwyn Bay. You know, I always think that was a great move, because I love North Wales as well, and I enjoyed the move down there.
So do you see any sort of pattern of, even unconsciously, the fact that you made your career by building solid foundations for families with homes, and yet you lived such a nomadic existence for the first 16 years? Yeah,
it was very nomadic. Maybe subliminally, but I enjoy housing. I really enjoy it. I left in Redrow in 2000. I went back in 2009 to basically to save the company from going under.
I left 18 months ago, and guess what? About 3 weeks ago, I bought another house building company. So I guess I can't keep out of it, really. I think I'm really, I think it's very much in the blood. So it could well be, Damien. It may be that is subliminally there, and not consciously though.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Let's discuss Redrow then. You started this by describing luck that came your way. You're only going to make good use of any luck with lots of hard work. For people listening to this that want to set their own businesses up, or maybe already run their own businesses and are struggling somewhat, can you give us an insight into the hard work and the sacrifice from you and I guess your partner at that time, and how hard it was?
It was very hard because I started Redrow in November '74. I was only 21 myself, and I was as green as grass. Absolutely didn't have a bloody
Can that not
clue.
be helpful sometimes, that naivety?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It can be helpful because you're not afraid of anything, and I wasn't afraid of anything anyway because I didn't have anything, so I had nothing to lose. And my father helped me out with some finances, basically to pay the wages until we got a draw from the contract, and then to buy materials. And of course, as a new kid, nobody would give you credit, so you had to buy everything cash on delivery and everything. But that helped me out, and I got through it. Really tore through it, and then realised at the end of it I had no work. So I had a few guys with me and no work. And anyway, the company I was working for previously, whose contract it was that I did it as a subcontract for, said, "Oh, actually, we've got other jobs we need finishing off." So they kept me going for a couple of years until such time as I got other contract work. But I don't think I think it was more naivety. I never knew anything other than hard work. I never knew anything other than getting up at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning and getting out of the house and being on site for 7 and working all the daylight hours. I used to dread the winter because you've only got 8 hours of daylight in the winter, and thought of working an 8-hour day was just like, what do you do with the rest of your life? It's just impossible. So I think it was tough on my first 2 kids from my first marriage because I didn't see them.
And how old were you when you had them?
25 when I had my.
So you'd really only just started. The business was in its infancy.
Yeah, really. The business was very much in its infancy. We were still very much contracting, civil engineering contracting at the time. And then 2 years later, my daughter was born. So they hardly saw me as a kid until 1991, 92, when I took them out of school and went around the world for 6 months. I took a sabbatical. And
what prompted that?
Well, at the time, Redrow had now become quite a successful house builder, still private company, and I'd seen the recession coming. I'd sold out. But at that time we'd expanded into the southeast of England, and the southeast of England was going crazy. Nigel Lawson had put an end in double Miras relief, which had caused a mini boom in the housing market. Well, not a mini boom; it was a massive boom actually. House price inflation went to 25% overnight. And I looked at this, we couldn't get labour to work because prices were going up almost by the day. And I said, the north of England was nothing like this, and the rest of the business was behaving fairly normally. But it's the southeast that was on a huge regional boom. And I said, this is unsustainable, sold out in the southeast. So that took the company back into cash in the bank. So when the recession started to bite in 89, 90, we were sat there with money in the bank, ticking over nicely because the north kept going, and we were well established in the north of England. By 91, I was bored, completely bored out my brains, because although the recession was really probably at its peak, there were the land prices were still far too high. So you couldn't buy land. We had enough land in the north of England, so the thrill for me is doing the deals, and there was no deals to be done. So I was getting up in the morning, and what are we doing? Oh, yes, we're going to build some more houses today. And for me, that's no challenge at all. I need to be doing better and better and better. And I was bored out of my brain. So we had one rainy Sunday morning in probably about March time, and I said to Pam, my wife, I said, I can't just drive me nuts. This, I'm not busy enough. I said, how do you fancy going around the world? And she said, you've had how much you drank?
So money wasn't your driver because the business was doing well.
The business was doing very well. I was boredom was my driver.
Right. So money didn't give you enough of a thrill. You need more in your life.
No, there was nothing to do, because in recessions, even a recession has a cycle. First of all, it's firefighting everywhere, and then it goes flat, and people don't realise that there's a new reality here. And then when people do realise a new reality, things like in our game, house prices drop, but land prices drop tremendously, and then all of a sudden it gets exciting again, and then you gear up for the next. For the Phoenix, really, for coming out. But all through, we traded, we were making money, we were making very good money, but we weren't expanding. And without expanding, that was no use to me. So I said, no, I know I've had a couple of glasses of wine. I said, but we're doing it. And so for the next 3 months, I planned a trip. We went to 22 different countries around the world. Don't forget, it was pre-mobile phones and everything, pre-internet. So we had to plan everything meticulously, because we went to places. We didn't go to the tourist places. We went to places that nobody had ever seen. We were one of the first tourists back into Beijing following the Tiananmen Square massacre. Okay. We were, I think, the first. My kids were the first kids ever to go overland from Tibet. We went right through Tibet, through to Nepal. And there was a road called the Friendship Trail, which was an unmade road in those days. It's the main trading route now, but it was an unmade road in those days. You go within a few miles of Everest Base Camp.
Wow. Why did you want to do this with your children?
Well, to give them something that they could never get in their life. I was with my daughter this week. It was her 40th birthday this week, and she still talks about that world trip.
Gives me goosebumps. Lovely.
Yeah. They were 10 and 12. They both had birthdays on the trip, their 10th birthday and their 12th birthday respectively, and they still talk about it. And I made them write it. The quid pro quo for me was the kids were brilliant at mental arithmetic, because wherever we were, I'd be throwing them questions all the time, and they had to write a daily diary. That was the deal. Non-negotiable. Wherever you were, and we used to have these Lonely Planet books, and they say, right, this is where we're going today, and so let's do some research about it and do the history, and they had to write a minimum of 2 pages. My eldest lad got cute, and his writing just became bigger. So I said, no, that's now 3 pages if you want to do that. So it's 2 pages of diary writing per day. And they hated it at first, but actually they really got into it. And those diaries became something that they look back on in later life. And so, yeah, we had 6 months out. And
see, what fascinates me about that, Steve, is that given the busy, frenetic life that you'd led up to then, this sounds to me like this is one of the first times that you've learned to put your foot on the ball and slow down. What did that period give you?
Well, we didn't slow down. We did it at 1,000 miles an hour. We literally, as I say, there was no internet and no mobile phones. So I had to plan it like a military operation from the start. So when we went, for example, from Tibet to Nepal, I had to tell them the exact day I was going, and even the time I was going to go there, because the Tibetan guy could only take us to guide, and could only take us to the border, and we had to have a Nepalese guide pick us up, and you are literally in the middle of nowhere. You can't hitchhike because there's no roads. That you are completely and utterly in the middle of nowhere. And then there was a rainstorm the week before, and all the roads were washed away. So instead of going by 4x4 to the border, we had to do the last 6 mile with trekking down. So we had to hire some Sherpas and walk down these mud covered mountains down to the border, and but we had to be there to meet the guide on the other side.
But what did that period give you, though? So whilst it maybe wasn't a change of pace, what did you learn about yourself in that period?
Well, I think the most important thing it gave me was a catch up with my kids. It was great fun to spend 6 months 24/7 with them, and to have a venture. It was an adventure that I'm pleased to say no other kids really have done.
Well, you couldn't do it today, even if you wanted to.
You couldn't do it today, and it would be so different today because the bloody mobile phones going, and the internet. We were lucky. I'm so pleased that we did it at a time when there was no phones and there was no internet.
Yeah.
Because looking back, it really added something to, and the fact that we went to places. We were one of the early visitors to the Galapagos Islands, for example. And I know it's fairly regular trips these days there, but I can remember it there when going to islands where few people have been to, and that's the kind of trip that we did. It wasn't going from 5-star hotel to 5-star hotel. Not at all. We slept out in native villages. We slept on, having bugs coming in your stew because when you put a light up, you attract all the bugs. And I didn't realise the steam actually goes up, kills the bugs, and it all goes into your
bit of protein, right?
That's what I said to the kids. It's exactly what I said to them. It's just added protein.
Love it. We've only been speaking for a short amount of time, but I think already I'm getting the impression that you're not someone who spends his life waiting for the perfect moment to make a decision. And I've got lots of friends around me where I say, you should be doing this. And they say, I don't think it's the right time. And it's whether you set your own business up at 21, whether it's having kids when you've got a fledgling business that's only 4 years old, whether it's making the decision to change the way your business operates because of an incoming recession, whether it's just disappearing off around the world for 6 months. You don't seem to me like someone who overthinks or waits for the perfect moment to do something. You just decide it feels right and you go for it. Is that fair?
I've always been counterintuitive. So when the herd are going one way, I think I look at it. I'll probably be one of the forefront of that herd at the beginning, and then you get to a point where you see there's too many people following that. Let's have a look back. And frequently I'll go and do the complete opposite. I was the only house builder that sold out in the southeast in 88. The only one. In fact, there was I remember a newspaper article in the Express where the journalist said that Morgan's taken his bat and ball home to the north because he can't stand the heat in the southeast kitchen. And I remember seeing that same journalist years later, and said, "Do you remember that article you wrote?" And he said, "I do." And he wrote a retraction, in fairness to him. But in '93, I went back into the southeast and bought Costain homes when everybody else was going bust. By the time, remember I said before about the way cycles work, and if you wait for things to happen, you've missed the boat. Really, you've missed it too late. You've got to be there in front. And so I went back in. We bought Costain homes. Who'd just lost £100 million over the previous 3 years. Picked it up at a song, and that was Redrow back in the southeast again.
So what are your tools that you employ to make those kinds of decisions? Because that's quite scary to buy a business that's lost £100 million, and that's why lots of people wouldn't do it. What processes do you go through?
I like to think that I weigh things up. I had a discussion with my ex-colleagues at Redrow, who were very, very cautious during this pandemic. And I understand why they were reluctant to open up again after lockdown. And I didn't have a fallout with them, but I had certainly different views. And I said, guys, get out there, start building, start. I said, the sales will be there. And nobody believed me.
Yeah.
And had I been at Redrow, we'd have started work 6 weeks before they actually did. And I was completely right. The housing market is actually quite strong at the moment. I wouldn't have bought McBride Homes 4 weeks ago, if I hadn't have thought that the housing market was strong, because this recession that we're in now is about a pandemic. It's not about economic conditions. And for many people have suffered badly in this. And if you're in the leisure industry and the travel industry, oh my God, you're having a torrid time at the minute. Yeah. I know, because I've got Carden Park Hotel, and we're fighting it all the time. And but if you're not, people were furloughed. They were on 80% of the money, but they weren't commuting backwards and forwards. They weren't going out to pubs, restaurants, spending money. They weren't going on foreign holidays. Lots of people are actually better off. And if you think about it logically, you say, well, actually, why wouldn't the housing market be good? You've got virtually nil interest rates. Mortgage payments have never been lower. Why wouldn't it? And there's massive demand. I mean, the country needs millions of new homes. So why wouldn't the housing market be good? And it is.
See, what fascinates me about your answer here, Steve, is that you obviously see a bigger picture. So you talk about these patterns or these cycles that you describe. So if somebody was listening to this, how do they gain perspective to be able to look at the big picture and see these patterns, rather than get stuck in the moment and find themselves being reactive and responsive to events?
I think maybe this does go back to my childhood. I've never really thought about it, but when, as a kid, I was thrown into circumstances, I used to say, I'm not afraid of this. We're just going to have a go, and that includes many a scrape on the streets. You just have a go. You just get stuck in. So when you're in these situations, the last thing you should do, I think, is do what everybody else is doing. I mean, there are times when absolutely you have to do what everybody else is doing, but stand back and think. Everybody was going mad and paying ridiculous prices in 1988 for land. And I thought, it's a good time to sell and get out, because this isn't sustainable. And everybody else was panic selling in 1993. And I thought, you know what? This is a good time to buy. It's just stand back. And the same with this pandemic, to bring it up to date. If you just got to think it through. Just think it through. And then I always think, follow your conviction. If you believe in yourself, just do it. Just have a go. Don't be afraid to have a go. And following the herd, there are times if the building's on fire and everybody's running to get out, well, bloody run with them, but think as well. Think of the time when what's happening around you, and what you should be doing. As I say, we've just bought a new house build 3 or 4 weeks ago. If I thought that it was going to be a rubbish time for housing, I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah. I've heard it described, the 3 I's of a business analyst describe it as, there's some people that are initiators, some that are imitators, and then there's the idiots that follow. And it sounds very much that you're in that first initiator bit. You make things happen by stepping back and looking at patterns before you then commit fully.
Well, it's funny you should say that, Damien, because I always think in the past, when the property guys, i.e. the commercial property guys, start getting into housing, then you know it's time to get out. Because God bless them, it's not what they do. If they stick to commercial property, they're very, very, very good at it. But when they go into resi, that is the time to get out.
Yeah, that's the imitation stage.
Yeah, that's the imitation, yeah.
Can we talk about your brother who passed away in a motorcycle accident?
Yeah.
How much did that reframe your perspective on life?
It completely changed my life. And I always think that, I'm not a religious person, but my look totally changed when Jimmy died. We were really short of work, and as I say, I'm not a person that can sit still at all. I've always got to be doing something, and I didn't have enough work, and that was in 1977. And so I decided, I bought some Rolls Royces actually, old ones, old bangers, and the pounds to the dollar was almost 1 to 1. And you know what? I can sell these out in America for twice the price, and literally they were double the price out in America. So I thought, well, I'll go out there. I went out to America, went to California, really loved it. I thought, looked at what they were doing out there, and I thought, you know what, we can seriously do some damage out here. And so Pam and I decided to emigrate to California. I'm not qualified at anything, so I couldn't get a visa, but she could, because she was an SRN, she was a trained nurse. So she, under her job, she had a job lined up. We were all set to go, and then tragically my brother got killed in a motorbike accident. He was only 17. He went to pick up his pal from work, and a car pulled out in front of him, and that was that. My mum, who was just going through a divorce with my dad at the time, was just beside herself, almost suicidal, really. She was completely beside herself. Jimmy was the last one living at home. My sister had already married and gone. I'd already gone. We said, we can't do this. We're going to have to stay because I just can't leave her. Again, it was one of those lucky breaks for me, because to me it was like Jimmy pulling the strings from heaven, because my look completely changed almost on the spot. We got a contract, and there was no contracts around. We got a £40,000 contract to put a footpath right round the Great Orme in Llandudno. 40,000 doesn't sound like a lot of money today, but in those days for us it was a massive, massive job. And that saw us through the winter. And then the work just kept coming in. And also the decision not to go to California, we decided to start a family. So 9 months later, literally 10 months after Jimmy died, my eldest son was born. Wow. So it was life-changing. So from tragedy, something really good happened. The family started, but most of all, as I said, it was like Jimmy pulling strings, because literally the work started flooding in.
Do you still feel that's happening? Is it something you've carried with you?
I'm not. I don't sort of think a bit of luck and say, well, that's Jimmy doing it again. But I do thank my lucky stars, really, that I have had lucky opportunities in my life. But in saying that, I think opportunities are like windows, and there's too many people walk past windows with blinkered eyes and don't see them, don't see the window of opportunity.
That's what I find interesting. You talk about luck. You must have mentioned luck or lucky 20 times. These opportunities appear for everyone. The people that don't take them are the people that don't have the frame of mind that the opportunity is there. You're not lucky. You're an opportunity finder.
And that's, as I think we all go through life with windows of opportunity, and the thing to do is to take them when you've got them.
Because how do people see them? People that don't see opportunities at the moment, how do you reframe your thinking to see an opportunity? Is it basically being an optimist?
I think believing in yourself is very important.
What's your self-belief like?
I'm not cocky at all, in the sense that I believe in following my instinct, but in many ways I don't believe in myself at all. I'm rubbish at most things really, but I do. If I see something that I'm willing to go, I absolutely follow it. And by the way, I've got a few wrong on the way. I had a big investment in Eastern Europe when I was out of Red between 2000 and 2009, from about 2005, 6, 7, and oh my God, I got my fingers burnt. Good style. Those guys know how to leg you over out there, I can tell you. That cost me a lot of money. So I've had my cock-ups on the way.
It doesn't stop you from doing it again.
No, stick to your knitting. I think it's one of my sayings, stick to your knitting. And actually what made me think I could go to places like Turkey and Romania and Poland and outsmart the locals, I didn't. I got a good thick ear, and you got to learn from that.
So the stuff around Jimmy's death really fascinates me because of how you framed what Jake was asking around there about that optimism. And do you think there was something around a sense of perspective that it gave you, that, to see your brother pass away at 17? Do you think it shaped your view of the world, of these opportunities? You saw the life that he could have had and the opportunities that he had, and it just opened your eyes to those opportunities that were out there, like building the footpath and the contracts that came.
It shocked me to the foundations, actually. It shocked the whole family, because 17-year-old, saw him earlier on the day, I waved to him and he pulled tongues at me, and the shock of something like that coming right out of the blue completely was a reality check for me, because I was only 24 myself, and 23, 24 myself, and I think I can still remember and feel the shock of it all today, and it was a huge reality check. And I think it did make me think. And certainly the decision not to move to California, we took within a month of his death, and it was the right thing to do. And as I say, it was Jimmy, I think, pulling strings and changing it for us.
Can we talk about your involvement in football?
Yeah.
You talk about stick to your knitting.
Yeah.
Sticking to your knitting is not trying to buy a Liverpool Football Club, is it?
No, it's not. You're quite right. No, even I can break my own rules. But I think I've got that stick to the knitting by breaking my own rules and seeing that, you can't necessarily transfer skills.
What I love about this story is you grew up in Liverpool, it's your city, Liverpool Football Club is your football club. The ambition to just say, I'm going to buy it. I want to go and buy that football club. I love that. It comes back to the way you've lived your whole life, which is blue sky, big thinking, right?
Yeah.
Why didn't it happen?
Well, it nearly did, very nearly did. And there's actually, the truth has never come out about what actually happened. I tried to buy it for a couple of years before we eventually did strike a deal, which was the summer of 2004. And the deal was not to buy it, was to buy a controlling interest of it. It was 51%. And the deal was £70 million for 51%. So it valued club at 140 million. And if you look on Wikipedia today, it says I tried to buy the club for 60. It was just rubbish. It was 70, and that was split between 35 million for existing shareholders and 35 million cash injection into the club, because the club was in major debt. And the club, people have said to me, that doesn't sound like a lot of money. At the time, the turnover was just 100 million. The losses were 22 million that year. The club was in big debt. Sky, or the TV money, was about 30 million. And so with the crystal ball, you'd say, why didn't you go ahead and do the deal? But when we were told at the start of the deal, the losses were going to be about 5 million or so this year. So we weren't expecting it to be great. With due diligence, it was 22 million, not 5. Big difference. And then plus there was capitalisation of spend on the new stadium, which never transpired, but it was more money going on. We reckon the losses were more like 30, although the auditor accounts will tell you 22. And so at the end of it, I said, we'll still do the deal. We'll still do 51%, and we'll still do the 70 million. But I said, to me, the club needs more money, needs more cash, and I can't afford any more than 70 million. So the deal was changed to, or I deal 50 million to go into the club, and so 20 million to the existing shareholders, because the club needed the money, needed the investment. And anyway, the existing shareholders refused to change the deal, even though that the due diligence gave us the reality, something very different to what was presented when we effectively shook hands on it. So that's why it didn't go ahead.
Interesting.
But you speak about that you follow your instinct, and a lot of it is about logic, and yet the numbers that you're presenting there, Steve, would scream to walk away from a deal like that. So what was the driver to want to keep?
Well, as you quite rightly say, Damien, Liverpool Football Club was the club almost from the day I could talk, was a club I supported, and I was mad passionate in the 70s when I was a teenager. I used to go all over the country, never miss a match, home or away. So it was passionate to me, and I also was probably arrogant enough to think that I could change it round, but that's why I needed the 50 million in the club. And I felt we could change it round. They needed some new players. Rafa Benitez had just been appointed before me, but I think Rafa Benitez was probably the right man for the time. And a year later, when Istanbul happened, he proved that he was the right man for the job. And there were some fantastic young players in the side, none better than Stevie Gerrard, who was just a phenomenal player. But they also had some real duffers in there, high pressure signings, high cost signings that actually needed to be got out of the club, and knew it was going to cost, and that was more losses to come. But that's why I felt that the club needed 50 million, not 35 million, to get it forward. And I think, had the deal been done, I would have gone forward very happily. And God only knows what the history of Liverpool Football Club would have looked like. I'll never know. Nobody will ever know what would have happened.
Do you allow regret into your life? Because what I find interesting about this, if it was you've just bought another house building company, that wasn't a heart decision, that was a head decision. Buying Liverpool was a heart decision, not a head decision. So when it doesn't happen, do you allow yourself to even now sit there and think, God, I could have bought that club, could have done this, could have done that? Or is that just wasted energy?
Jake, that's not something I ever do. It's one of my philosophies in life, move on. And move on from good things and bad things. You have to move on, never look back. Don't look in the rear view mirror.
You learn first from that?
Oh, you learn. I think you've got to learn. And, one of the things, what did I take home from that deal. It was the one that got away. You know, had you had a crystal ball and know that within just a few years the TV money was going to multiply, but it didn't know it was. I mean, I was looking at tens of millions of losses in the club. Had you know that the sponsorship and commercial deals and worldwide TV rights, etc., were coming down the corridor, of course you'd have done the deal. But we were where we were at the time, and but I never ever look back. I never look back on success either, because you know my philosophy, when we do something, when we really have a great year, say, well, yeah, we've got to beat that next year, and you just got to keep going.
Do you still enjoy it though? You take time to enjoy the successes or not?
I enjoy success. I enjoy the success of Redrow. I enjoy the success of creating more for the shareholders. One of the most fascinating things for me was the year before I left Redrow, my last year, we built our 100,000th house, which if you take an average, you know, about 3.2 people per house, bearing in mind we build family houses mainly, it's equivalent to a city the size of Nottingham or Newcastle. So I did allow myself to say, you know, what, bugger, you know, well done. And I never say that.
The lad that grew up in a house without a toilet has built 100,000 of them.
Built a city the size of Newcastle.
Wow.
No, I took a great deal of pride in just that achievement. But generally, I don't look back. I look forward. And you know, we've got a new housing business now, and I'm not going to be involved in the day-to-day of it, but we've got a good young management team there, and you know, I'll be supporting them all the way to try and do a bit more.
And football did come your way through Wolverhampton Wanderers.
Yeah.
Why did you want to do that then? Because you didn't support them?
Well, funnily enough, as a kid in Garston, the rage at the time was buying a bubble gum with footballing cards inside, and I always used to have these, and they were, when everything was black and white, TV was black and white, and newspapers were black and white, to see the colours of kits, which you only saw it actually on bubblegum cards, and I always used to think that the Wolves kit, I loved the kit colour, you know, the
gold and black,
and the name as a kid when you're sort of 6, 7, 8 years old, Wolves, and Wolves were right up there to the top, and I said, wow, that's a great, just a great thing, and the logo with the wolf head, and you know, as a 7-year-old, it was very impressionable, and so it was always my second team. I always looked out for it. Very, very first cup final I ever saw was the 1960 cup final. I was no higher than this table, and but I remember being fascinated, and Wolves won, and wow, you know, I wish Liverpool would be as good as Wolves, and that was the thinking at the time, and so I spent my whole life always looking. Second result was always Wolves. And then I went there to a match. I was invited to a match, and I got pounced upon by the Wolves directors, and they said, "You've got to buy this club. I know you didn't buy Liverpool. You've got to buy this club." Now, I'd been approached by 15 different clubs after the Liverpool deal fell away, which I won't name, but many of them are in the Premier League right now. But I didn't have the interest in going to them. But what was I thought? You know what? Where I live, I'm only an hour away from the ground, and it's always been my soft team. And the deal was very good. I mean, the deal was buy the club for £10, but
was this from Jack Haywood and his family?
So Jack Haywood, it was a lovely, lovely guy. But to put money in, he'd retired to the Bahamas, and he couldn't run the club, and he was looking for somebody. He had a very tight stipulation. He would only sell it to an English person who loved football and who could put money in. And I think I ticked those boxes. So I did the deal with Jack. And yeah, I had 9 years at Wolves. Very interesting years indeed.
What did you learn most about running a football club?
It's bloody tough.
Because a lot of businessmen get into it and suddenly look like bad businessmen because it struggles. Why do people get it so wrong, and what did you learn?
Well, rightly or wrongly, and as I say, I don't look back, but rightly or wrongly, I run the club as a business. When I got in, truly, and I knew this when we did due diligence, but the club had some debt, not huge, but it was certainly £6-7 million or something. But it didn't own its own ground. It didn't own the land around the ground. And as a property person, I think, and one of the leases literally had 2 or 3 years to go, and it, quite frankly, could have closed the club down if we didn't get it sorted. So I set about getting all the freehold around the ground. So the club now sits in a 12-acre freehold island. We didn't even have any lease on where the away coaches go. We just had a very loose agreement. So I had to get that sorted out. And I gave Mick McCarthy, who was the manager at the time, a purse to go and buy some players. We just missed out on promotion in my first season, but the second season we won the championship. We got in first position at the end of August and never lost it. We get all the way through the season and won the league comfortably, I think, by about 10 points. So that was us back in the Premier League, and that was Wolves had only been back in the Premier League once in the previous 30 years. And gone up under Sir Jack Hayward and got relegated in one season. So it was great. It was fantastic. The optimism ran. And, you think you walk on water your second season. Oh, yeah, we won. You get a reality check when you go in the Premier League. And then the agents come knocking on the door and demand increased wages for all the players. And the demands go ridiculous, and I think, is this not a world I'm used to? But you have to get used to it pretty quick.
Do you know what I think is interesting about successful businessmen that buy football clubs, right? Is that you work hard on the business side of the football club. You talked about buying the 12 acres and sorting out the coaches and looking after the stadium and the training ground, right? But that's not the sexy stuff.
No.
All people talk about with football is the players, the manager, the results, the performances, which you can't get involved in. That's the strange sort of dichotomy of being a businessman that owns a football club. The best bit, you get no access.
That's the really frustrating bit, I can tell you. And on the whole, I did leave it to the manager, although I had you always had a healthy relationship with the managers and talked to them all the time. And the chief exec there, I was on the phone with 4 or 5 times a week about buying players, selling players, etc. So you I was very heavily involved with it. And I had the business, I had Wolves for 9 years. And over the 9 years, and when we had years when we made profits, we had years when we made losses, but over a 9-year view, we didn't lose any money. And I was able to buy all the land back in, build a new stand, build an academy which is as good as any in the Premier League, both building wise and investments in players. So I was very proud of that achievement. But Jake, what you said is completely right. The fans want to see results on the pitch, and if you're not spending money all the time, then the fans are not happy. And we had 3 years in the Premier League. Which is, as I said, was much longer than they'd had over the previous 30-odd years. Then I did 2 bad appointments as managers, and we had a double relegation down to League One, and that was a real tough time, and it was tough with the fans, etc. And then I had one of the most enjoyable years I've ever had. Involved in football, and that was when we were in League One. We hammered everybody.
we literally hammered everybody and won the league with 103 points, which I think was the record. And came up to the championship, and it was fantastic going home every Saturday, having won 3-4, 5-1 or something. And
so a mutual friend of Jake and ours, Stuart at Norwich, when he first went in, I remember him saying that he couldn't believe that Delia Smith and her husband Michael weren't welcomed into the football side of things in many ways. They were just seen as business owners. And one of his first cultural steps he took was to bring them in and to utilise their knowledge and their skills and their resources as business people, and to make them feel a part of the football side of it. Did anyone ever do that with you at Wolves, in terms of to see the success that you'd had and say, what can we learn from it, rather than assume that because you weren't a football person, you had nothing to offer them on that side?
Well, like I said, I had a close relationship with the chief exec, Jez Moxey, who was there right throughout my time. And I tried through Jez as much as anything else to instill that to the managers, because it's the managers who tell you the players they want, and then it's the chief executive in our case that did the actual deal. And all the time we were saying, well, we can't afford those wages. That's ridiculous, and we're not paying that kind of money. But we will pay X instead of Y, and we will pay X a week instead of Y a week to the player. And I think we got a reputation as quite a tough club to deal with, because I put that sort of business sense into the deals we were trying to do. And I never had the sort of one-to-one personal relationship with the players, but I was friendly with them all.
Did the coaches ever come and say, Steve, what can I learn from you?
No, not really. I think with Mick McCarthy, I liked Mick a lot, and it was a very sad day when we had to part company, but I used to have quite a good dialogue with him. I think through talking to him, I told him my business philosophies, and he got it. He wasn't one of these crazy managers who just think money grows on trees and you can just do it. And I think he shaped his ambitions accordingly.
Yeah. Because I'll tell you why I'm asking, Steve. That we've had some coaches on here, whether these are young coaches like Frank Lampard or Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, or some more experienced coaches like Sean Wayne from Rugby League. And one of the common themes that come out in our discussions is the need to manage upwards, to speak to the decision makers and get time and patience. Now, as the guy that is making those decisions, can you give us some insight that those coaches could have of how can they manage upwards effectively? How could a coach make sure that you're on board with what they're trying to do, to give them the air cover and the space and time to be able to implement their ideas?
What we did right from the onset is decide how we were going to run Wolves. Now, I was never going to put bottomless amounts of money into the club as an investment. As I said from the outset, I wanted to run it as a business. So we had to be smart. And for me, the idea of being smart was to grow your own. And there have been plenty of successful clubs who've done well by doing that. So one of the early things that we did was to strongly enhance the academy. And I increased the academy budget, I think, tenfold to say... I think they only had literally a couple of 100,000 a year, and I said, no, we can't do that. We put it up to 2 million a year, and on top of that, we put the capital investment, building some fantastic facilities, bought more land and more pitches, and I said, right, our route forward is a long-term one, and that is to grow our own effectively, but we also had
some close relationships with smaller clubs who, when there was a bright young star coming through them, there was a further budget to buy in 15, 16-year-olds and bring them into the... Matt Doherty was one who's just been sold to Spurs, but we signed Matt as a 16-year-old. So that was my way forward. Now, we sat down with the manager at the time, and we used to probably have dinner together once a month, and we talk about the philosophy of how we were going to grow the club and what the future was for the club, and that's the way I handled it. And we used, as I say, we used to meet up at the hotel once a month and have a couple of bottles of wine and go through everything.
So it's regular dialogue.
Regular dialogue, absolutely regular dialogue. Yeah,
yeah,
100%. You know, for me, that's the only way it works. I think other people have different views and they can make it work for them. But for us, it was a team effort, and I always think actually having communication is so important, whatever you're doing in life, and communicating what your plans are for the team and getting everybody to buy into that, I think is massively important.
You spoke about the pain of having to sack Mick McCarthy and then the mistakes of the managers that you employed after that, not just in football, but in business as well. How do you deal with or make the decision to let certain people go? And then how do you make sure you bring the right people into your businesses, into your life?
Do you know, that's one of the hardest things you can do. I remember early days of Redrow having a buyer who we'd never had a buyer. I did all the buying, and we were growing literally at 100% per annum at one stage. And so you just couldn't keep on juggling all the balls up. And I remember bringing in a buyer and thinking, wow, this guy really knows what he's doing. He produced wonderful schedules, which I never did. I was very seat of the pants, get it here, get it there, but this Mal, his name was, brought in a professionalism to the business. Wow, that's great. And then 2 years later, we doubled and then doubled again. And he'd had to bring in an assistant and then another buyer as well. So we were growing so fast. And then I suddenly realised that this guy who I was very fond of was actually not a number one. He was he would have been a very good number two, but his number two we brought in was much more efficient than he was. And it was one of my lessons about over promoting somebody, because our chief buyer was actually not our best buyer at all. And actually the number two needed to be the chief buyer. And I had to have a very painful conversation with him, which I can still remember to this day. And it really taught me a lesson about over promoting people, and when you make a mistake, you've got to deal with it. As soon as you realise you've made a mistake, that you just get on and deal with it. And ditto with football and the managers. Mick did a great job for the club, but I think definitely lost it with the fans. And when you get the fans outside shouting for him to go and all the rest of it, and then we lost. I think the final straw, we lost 5-1 at home to West Brom. Well, that's like Liverpool losing 5-1 at home to Manchester United. It's the holy grail. You cannot do that. And so we had to have that very sad conversation. But it was the right thing to do, and no regrets about doing it. But you've got to stand up to reality, really.
And my other question about that period is about external validation. I often feel sorry for owners of football clubs, because when it goes well, credit the manager, credit the players. When it goes badly, get rid of the owner. Did it bother you that you put all that time, all that effort, all that money into Wolves, and then as soon as things go badly, people are just looking for the next owner, the next person to come and put money in? Or does that external validation from people not bother you?
Yes, I think it does bother me. I think you wouldn't be human if you said it didn't, and it did bother me, but it wasn't to the point where I was sort of losing sleep over it or anything. But my life was changing. I just got together with my new girlfriend, who was now my wife, and my priorities were changing. I think because of that, because I was well back in Redrow, and that was taking quite a bit of time, and I was thinking, well, you know what? I've done 9 years. Have I done my bit? I've carried the baton through. I'm leaving the club in a much better position than where I found it, and it's been good fun and time to move on, really. So yeah, no looking back, just a new chapter in the book of life.
Before we finish, I want to talk about your philanthropy. Making a lot of money is praiseworthy, but it kind of just happens if you run a successful business. Giving away £1/3 billion to charity isn't something that just happens. That is a conscious decision. First of all, well done for having the mindset of giving £300 million to charity. I'm just so interested in why you've done that.
Again, it probably comes back to my roots. I've been very successful in life. I go to nice places. I live in a nice house, and etc. But I never forgot where I grew up, and some of the kids I grew up with who had a different future in front of them. And I think what got me into it probably in the first place was I got introduced to Alderhay Hospital, who were trying to build a new oncology unit. And I said, well, I'm going to help them with this. So I gave up my salary and bonuses in the 90s and put everything I earned into trying to fund this oncology unit. I ended up walking across.
Why was that? Did you have a personal connection to?
No, I just got introduced to it, and I went there and I met the team that ran it, and I saw some of the young kiddies who just gone through chemo and lost their hair, and it got to me. Right. It completely got to me. And I've got to help this. I've got to help these kids out, and any other kids that come along. And then the whole thing sort of got me thinking about my background, and I have got to start giving something back in life. And I raised £1 million for Alderhay back in the 90s, and did a Guinness Book of Records walk from Mediterranean to the Atlantic across the Pyrenees. Wow. Raised 360,000 for them. But then that sort of started a chain reaction. There was a young boy on the ward called George, and I took a pair of hobnail boots in for a photo opportunity, and it was a lovely photo of me and George, and in these sort of size 12 boots, not mine, by the way, but which went on all the papers at the time, and I was very fond of little George, and he sadly died. We were told literally as we were flying out to the Pyrenees to do the walk that he probably wouldn't be here by the time we got back, and it sort of broke my heart. We had a few rough days on that, particularly the first couple of days where we were up in several thousand meters up, and it was blizzarding, and it was horrible cold, and George just got us all the way through it.
Amazing.
And I think not long after that, I left Redrow, and I felt, I've got to set something up. I've got to set a foundation up to give him back. I put, I think, £5 million in at first, and the first few years were sort of tentative, and I thought, no, we can do better, and we've got a team in, and a very good team, and a lady called Jane Harris who runs it to this day, who's fantastic. And I think the more we did, the more we realised that how much stuff needs doing, and one thing led to another, and Redrow's shares were doing very well, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to give 10% of the business, which was about a third of what I personally owned, to
to the charity. And so we put these shares into the charity, and we're taking it from there, and we're spending it now. We were the first in COVID and lockdown to bring in an emergency fund to save other charities. We pledged £1 million a week to help keep other charities going, and a good deal of that was spent on Merseyside, but in Cheshire and North Wales as well, where we're from. I get it. I work hard at the philanthropy now, in the same way I worked hard at Redrow, and we've just been recognised by the government, really. We've just been given some £10 million of match funding from the government, and I think we're the largest individual charity in the country to get this match funding. There was £75 million available, and we've got 10 of it. So, which means we can put an extra £20 million into charities in the Northwest to keep them going through this horrible period of the pandemic.
So can I ask you a question about it, Steve? Because this is something that often fascinates me, that you see people that have been incredibly successful and acquired great wealth and privilege, but keep going for it. And it's often like seeing somebody food shopping when they're hungry. They have to keep acquiring more and more. What was your mindset to say, I've got enough now and I want to give back? What was the moment or the catalyst or even the way of thinking that because what you're describing sounds so obvious outside of it, but it can't have been an easy decision to do what you've done.
No, you're quite right, Damien. It wasn't. I mean, I had to think long and hard about it, because it's counterintuitive. You work hard for all this money, and then at the stroke of a pen, you give literally £300 million away. Or it was already given 50 million away. That it was 250 million on top of the 50 we'd already given away. And it is counterintuitive. You think, but I thought, well, I don't need that money. My kids will be left enough. So nobody's going to starve in the Morgan family. But there are plenty of other people out there that will and that need it. As I say, I always work hard. I still do work hard, but I don't work hard for the money. I work hard because I like it, and I love doing what I do. Hence the new housing business, hence Carden Park Hotel. We've just spent tens of millions of pounds on it, and building a new spa and everything. It's and I love seeing how successful it is. Pre-pandemic, I love creating things. For someone who was kicked out of art class when they were just 13, I love creating things and creating the foundation, and knowing that of living entrepreneurs who put money into charity. I think we're probably the biggest, amongst the biggest in the country, if not the biggest, and I get a thrill out of that. I get a thrill out of being the best, and doing the best, and putting money back into Merseyside and into Cheshire and North Wales, and we support the area I came from. I grew up in Liverpool, moved to Wales, live in Cheshire, and the money goes into that patch. We do support a couple of national charities for other reasons, but. And I get a great sense of thrill. I mean, one example was Maggie's Centres, who do fantastic work at giving cancer support, and it's a national charity, and actually we don't give to national charities, but they needed to build new Maggie Centres in Clatterbridge and in the Royal Liverpool, which has become the new regional cancer centre. So I said, right, we'll do it. We'll build them, and they used to build these. They used to get iconic architects and build these centres for £6, £7, £8 million a piece. I said, you're not going to do that. I said, I'll build you them and I'll pay for it, but I'm going to do them for £2 million a piece and show you how it's done. Clatterbridge will be open in January, and it'll be open on budget
under £2 million, and it'll be the best yet.
Love it. I think before we move on to our final quickfire questions, a quick mention about work ethic. You're 68 years old, you've just bought a new building firm.
67.
67 years old. 67 years old, fight for those extra years at this point. 67 years old, just bought a new building firm. You've made money, given money away, bought football clubs, sold football clubs. You've packed so much in. How much has hard work been at the very centre of all of these achievements? I hear rumours about 10,000 steps before breakfast.
Yeah, we got a lockdown puppy, and so me and him do our 10,000 steps before breakfast every day. Yeah, I think your brain's a muscle, and like any muscle, use it or lose it. So to me, I hope I have the ability to be using that particular muscle till the day they put me in the box, and that's it really.
Very good. Right, we have quickfire questions. Go for it, Damien.
Steve, what are the 3 non-negotiable behaviours that you and the people around you must buy into?
Smoking was number 1, because I banned smoking in our Redrow offices in the 80s, way before it became law. I detest smoking. Liars and thieves, I cannot abide. For me, anybody who lies has got no future with me, and anybody who steals is out. I suppose laziness is the third one. I think if you're lazy, you've got what's coming to you. So that's my 3.
What advice would you give to a teenage Steve just starting out on his journey?
I think I'd say to him, what do you want? If you want to grow a business and be successful, there's only one formula, and that's you've got to work like hell. If there was a commandment, it'll be thou shalt work like hell. And don't, I hear about this work-life balance, and that's fine. And you can grow a career doing exactly that. But if you want to build a business, you've got to work. Nobody's going to do it for you. You've got to work.
How important is legacy to you?
I think legacy is massively important to me. And I thought about this question, and I thought, I had to deeply ask myself, and I think I came to the conclusion that it was massively important. 100,000 people live in 100,000 homes supporting 300,000 people live in a Redrow house, and I'm very proud of that. That's a legacy. The foundation will have huge funds in it when I eventually die, which hopefully not for a while yet. But we already have helped millions of people on the way. And, to me, that's a legacy. And my children, they're all different. There's 5 of them plus my stepson. All 6 of them are completely different personality, but, they'll have my legacy going forward as well. So I can come to the conclusion that it is massively important to me.
Are you happy?
Yes. Yes, I think, you go through life and you have your blips, and there are times where you want to kick the cat, and even though I've never had a cat. But, we all have our moments, and, this COVID situation is, you could get down on it, couldn't you? But, you got to keep attacking. And attack has always been my philosophy. And if you attack, for me, attacking is happiness, and attacking and having a lovely wife and home life is very important to me.
And what's your one golden rule to live a high performance life?
Back to my commandment, thou shalt work like hell if you want. As I said right at the beginning, I don't think I've got any skills particularly. And I do mine through endeavour, and I'm driven. And I think my drive is I drive myself to be happy as well. So it's drive and hard work.
Brilliant.
It's been an absolute pleasure to sit and chat to you for the last little while. We talk a lot on this podcast about fault versus responsibility and living a life where you don't look for blame and you don't attribute fault. You just take the responsibility. And I think you are the epitome of that. You know, it wasn't your fault that you were born into poverty, or your fault you lost your brother at a young age, or your fault that Margaret Thatcher put a sledgehammer through the trade you worked in, or your fault that Liverpool didn't come off, or any of these things. But every step of the way, you made it your responsibility to still, through sheer graft and bags of self-belief, to make a success out of your life. And what I love about that is that absolutely anyone can work hard and believe in themselves.
It's very true. Thank you.
Please hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, give us a thumbs up, leave a review, but somehow get involved with the High Performance Podcast and become part of our growing community.